Hey there, I'm Sammy and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different than I normally would with an MCM style dresser. Now stay tuned to see exactly how it turns out. This is the piece that we're starting with. It is a MCM style tallboy dresser. I picked this piece up off of Marketplace and knew I could turn it into something much better than the current state it was in. There was a lot of damage to the wood veneer, a lot of deep gouges, scratches, there was some missing veneer, and damage to the top laminate surface. I knew I was going to paint the outside, but I might be keeping the drawer faces wood, but we'll see a little bit later into this process. You'll see here there's quite a bit of damage in the veneer, so my best bet was going to be filling and painting. However, the drawers were in really great shape inside and out, so we'll see what we can do with those. First step, I'm taking all of the drawers out. And then one of them was coming apart where the joints met at the front, so I just grabbed some glue, I tossed that in there, and then I put a clamp on it, and that drawer was good as new. Then I grabbed my assistant and we got to work. The first thing I did was remove these little feet on the bottom of the legs. I find these more annoying than anything, but they also need to be removed because they were only on 3 of the legs, so it made the dresser a little bit uneven. Moving on to some more repairs, there was some layers of veneer that were coming apart on the base of the dresser, so again I just tossed some glue in there really quickly, and then for this my go-to is tape instead of clamps. I feel like I can get even pressure along the whole surface, especially when it's thin pieces of wood like this. I just secured them with a piece of tape and then let it dry. Next, I got out my orbital sander and started the sanding process. Now for this one, I planned on painting the exterior of the dresser base, so it just really needed a scuff sand. However, this had a lot of gouges in it, and a lot of which came out with my sander. So whenever I feel like I can use my sander to get out the majority of these scratches or any dents that there are, I will try that first, and then whatever I can't get, I'll go back in later and fill that in. But for this, I got majority with my sander. For sanding on the top, this is a laminate veneer, so it's going to be more of like a plastic that you're sanding. So for this, you just want to scuff sand it, and then any scratches that there are, we'll go in and fill it later. You can kind of see here that the corner has a big piece missing, so I definitely need to go in and fill that with some Bondo, but this is just giving it a good scuff sand. Next, I got it flipped over and started working on removing the old finish from the sides. I'm going in here with an 80 grit sandpaper just because I want to remove the bulk of this old finish, if not all of it. I've said there's something about it, I just can't remove most of it, I gotta get it all off, but that's just me. And then again, I'm trying to get out any major scratches that I can with my sander, and then later on we'll move up to a higher grit. I then moved on to sanding the drawers, and for these I switched on to a 120 grit sandpaper because I didn't want to burn through the veneer, because my goal was to keep these natural wood. So I wanted to see what it looked like underneath, and the 120 grit was going to help me remove the old finish with hopefully not burning through the veneer. On the edges especially, you'll notice that I'm going in really quick passes because it's really easy to burn through the veneer on the edges. It can get really thin there. and so I'm just being super careful here. I was really pleased with how the wood was looking underneath the old finish, so I think it is a go on these natural wood drawers. There were some areas on the dresser that needed to be filled, so I'm going in with an all-purpose Bondo and just filling those areas. I always make sure to use a Bondo whenever I'm working with things around a corner or on an edge, or if it's just a bigger surface to fill, I use a Bondo because I want something that's going to harden and be nice and reliable and durable for years to come. Whereas a traditional wood filler can kind of rub off, it can chip really easily, but Bondo is going to cure nice and strong for us. On some areas I did apply a piece of tape because I feel like that can give you a little bit smoother of a surface and just make the sanding process a little bit easier. Once the glue had dried from the base of the dresser that I glued earlier, I removed the tape and then I got to sanding the legs. Now for these, I want to match the drawer fronts, so I needed to remove all of that old finish. So I'm going in here with my orbital sander, just using a 120 grit sandpaper. There wasn't too much finish on these, so it came off really easily and they looked good as new and got out all the scuffs with this sander. Then once the Bondo had cured and hardened, I went in with a 120 grit sandpaper to remove any excess Bondo and go over the entire surface to prep it for the primer. Because I want the legs to match the drawer fronts and be natural wood, I need to go ahead and cover these up. I'm just using some painter's tape for this and going all the way up the leg, making sure all of it is covered so that way I don't get any spray off or paint on it when it comes to priming and painting the exterior of the dresser. Next, as always, I'm going in with my air compressor to remove any dust before we go in and paint. This is really important if you're using a sprayer because the sprayer is going to move all this dust around, and if we don't remove it, then it's going to get in our paint. There's a piece of the veneer that was peeling that I missed earlier, so I just tossed a little drop of glue in there and put a piece of tape on that and let that dry while I got everything else ready. I wiped everything down with a wet rag just to collect any last dust that was sitting on the surface before we go in with our primer. For this piece, I'm going in with the Bin Shellac Base Primer by Zinsser because I was concerned about bleed through. Now I'm painting this a lighter color, which is very unlike me, and that is kind of the different aspect about this piece. I would typically not go for a lighter look with a MCM style dresser because it's really just not my vibe, but I wanted to give it a go. Because I was concerned about bleed through, I wanted to use this primer so that it would block everything and lock it in so that I wouldn't be worried to apply a light paint color and get any bleed through it. So I'm applying a thorough coat of this. You'll see I have a little attachment, and this just makes it so much easier to use a spray can because it gives you a trigger to pull instead of using the little button on top of the can. You can see this paint gives a lot of spray off, so that's going to turn into little tiny particles sitting on top of the surface, so you want to make sure and sand between coats. This is a very important step in general, but when you're using a primer like this or any kind of paint that gives a lot of spray off, you want to make sure to smooth the surface before you go in with either a second coat or another coat of paint. And for that, I'm using a 220 grit sandpaper just to lightly go over the surface. This isn't really removing any of the primer, it's just making sure the surface is smooth and ready for the next coat. Then I used my air compressor hose once again to spray off any of that dust that was left from sanding. And then Molino wanted to come out really quickly and show you a few of his tricks. Then I went in and gave everything one last good wipe down to ensure that we get all of the dust on the surface and it's good to go for paint. I'm going in with a really light cream white color, and I actually don't know the name of this. I got it from the mess up section at Home Depot. It's a really nice cream color. It's not super white. It kind of has a little warmth to it, but it's hard to tell here in the sun because the primer is also white. But I'm going in with one thorough coat of this, and then I let that sit and we go in with a second coat later. Before I go in with my second coat, obviously I've let this sit and dry. I'm going in first with that 220 grit sandpaper just to smooth the surface over. There wasn't a lot of overspray, but you want to make sure to do this between coats. Then I'm going in really quickly with a wet rag to collect any dust on the surface so that it's ready for coat number 2. Focusing back on the drawers, I'm going in with a 220 grit sandpaper to finish these off and smooth the surface for the next step. And then I'm going in with a wet rag to wipe them down and collect any of the dust so they're prepped and ready. Now I'm going in with a paint wash on these because I want them to be a little bit lighter than they are right now because I want this whole dresser to have a lighter theme. So I'm going in with a paint wash and I'm using a 1:3 ratio. That's 3 parts water and 1 part paint. You can always mess with this later. I did a little bit and you'll see here in the video as we go along. So I grabbed a little bristle brush and I'm just applying this paint wash to the drawer faces and making sure it gets thoroughly covered. You'll see here I am applying a couple coats because I wanted to be careful at first. You always want to go a little bit less than you think because it's really hard to take this away once it's on the wood. So I go in with a light coat here and then I'm wiping it off to kind of see what it's going to look like afterwards, and I think it's a little bit too little for me, so I'm going in with another coat until I get my desired look. Now don't be afraid to do this. Like I said, you always want to start a little bit less than you think that you're gonna want because you can always add more. This is super buildable, so on some of them I did a couple coats, on some of them I did a little bit less, but overall I just did what I needed to make each drawer even with each other. Because I want the legs to match the drawer fronts, I'm using the same paint wash process here and I'm just applying as many coats as I need to get the desired shade. There was one little area on a drawer front that I filled with some Bondo, so I need to go in now and touch that up with my paint touch-up kit. So I just put a few colors on my palette, mixed it up, and then you always want to start with a lighter shade and build from there. So I applied a little light shade there, and then I'm slowly going in with the darker colors until I get the desired look and it blends well with the rest of the wood grain. Then I went in with a polyurethane top coat to finish everything off in a satin finish, and I sprayed the front of the dresser really quickly, and then I put all the drawers in so I could seal everything else at once. Once it dried, I got it inside and staged everything for some listing photos. Whenever I'm staging, I always love to add some greenery, maybe some blankets to add some warmth and coziness, and then I always add a candle as well. And now for the finished reveal. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making over this piece, even though it wasn't 100% my style. I think it turned out really well. I'll leave a profit breakdown in the description below, so go check that out, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!